Okay, we are recording now. So, welcome. I am Carrie Cedarquist. I'm the Director of Community Impact for United Way of North Idaho. I think you all probably know that if you're here. And what we are here today to do is go over the Community Care Fund application, the new software platform that we have that will hopefully make your lives a lot easier in applying for this and reporting on this grant. And then we'll take some time to discuss any questions and answer any questions you might have. We'll spend about 30 minutes going through the actual application platform. And then my good friend and colleague Hannah Payton from the NIC Foundation will be sharing some tips and best practices around grant writing in general. That should be pretty helpful. She sent me her notes, and I'm pretty excited for that too. So a couple of housekeeping items. If you could please mute yourself. Tends to have a lot of feedback and background noise. And again, this will be, this training is being recorded, and following this training session, the live session, we'll upload it to our YouTube channel. So if you are on here, I'll just reply to you with the link. You're welcome to look at that. You're welcome to share it with folks. Maybe if you have other staff that are going to be grant writing. It's really important to us here at United Way and the Community Impact team that we're very transparent with our expectations and what our grant reviewers are looking for, and providing you with all the tools and resources that you need to be successful. Just as a short background on the Community Care Fund, the fund is developed through monthly payroll contributions from local employees. They have the option to put in a few dollars a paycheck, and we have corporate matches that also come in and help build this fund. Over the last decade, this fund has been able to grant $1.5 million to local nonprofits, and we're anticipating that this year we'll have another great fundraising year. Things are different with COVID, but typically we've had about $100,000 to grant out to organizations, and that's split between our three impact areas of education, financial stability, and health. So the way that it works is agencies will apply for a grant, and I say agency very broadly, so you can be a nonprofit, you can be a school, you can be a health district, and if you have any questions about your agency's eligibility, just reach out and ask us, and we're happy to look into that for you. So that I will walk us through the platform, but I also wanted to share with you how the application reviewing goes. And so I'll show you a sample of the evaluation, but ultimately all of the applications received are reviewed by a 3 teams of trained volunteers, and they are known as our impact councils, and they represent the 3 impact areas. So there's a separate group for each: financial stability, health, and education. They review those, all of the applications we receive with a evaluation rubric, so everybody's looking at the same metrics. They have discussions about those applications. They forward the information to an ad hoc finance committee that does a financial review of the organization, and then we also do site visits and interviews with program directors and staff. Those, of course, will very likely be virtual this year. But after that, those Impact Council members who have chair people as well to kind of lead the discussions and maintain a neutral mediation. And there are board liaisons from our board of directors on each of the councils. They make recommendations to the board of directors on funding, and those are voted on in our November-December combined board meetings. So what you can expect if you're applying, the deadline is the 30th, and you probably will, if your application is selected to move on to a site visit, you'll hear from the impact councils within a couple of months. And if your organization is selected for funding, that announcement will be made in December of this year. So For all those that are just joining us, I just wanted to reiterate a couple of agreements. This will be recorded. If you could mute yourself, that's really helpful. And we will have plenty of time for questions and answers following this overview of the application process. And so I encourage you to jot down questions as they're coming to you. Feel free to enter questions into the chat. I'll try and keep an eye on that as well. And before I really get going, I wanted to introduce and maybe have her say a few words about the process if she'd like. Our Community Impact Chair for the Board of Directors, April Fortier, who many of you already know. April, do you want to introduce yourself? Oh, you're muted. There we go.
Okay. You can see my mouth moving, but you can't hear me. So, good almost afternoon. My name is April Fortier, like Carrie said. I am the Community Impact Chair for the board. And for those of you that are not familiar with me, I spent about 15 years sitting on a Community Impact Council. So I am familiar with how the process works, and I don't really have a lot more to say, Carrie, other than I'm excited about some of our new processes that we have in place, and I'm glad that we could provide this training and Q&A for everybody.
Okay, thank you. All right, so first step for everyone, I'm going to jump right into our Zoom platform. So again, if you're just listening or can't see my screen, I should say this will be recorded, so you'll be able to go back through and see this. So on our website, on the Community Care Fund grant page, is a link to the reporting and application site, which is called EC Impact, and it's very easy to set up an account there for your agency. Once you sign up for an account, which I know many of you already have done, so that's encouraging that it was straightforward. You will be taken to this page. You will be automatically approved to start the Community Care Fund application. So since that is the only application we have open right now. So this is what your agency web or your agency site is going to look like. You will have the options over here on the left to be able to put in information about your agency. And then you'll need to assign at least one program from your agency or create a program, which is here under these program and project profiles, before you can apply for a grant. And so even if your organization is applying for general operational funds, it still needs to have a program. So as an example of that, food banks often will have a lot of operational things that are an umbrella over all of their work, but may call a program their food rescue program or their weekend backpack program. And we'll get into a little bit more how those can be woven into your overall operational ask, but you do need to have a program profile specifically created for this grant process. So once you are here on your agency site, you'll see what the this link here is the process that is available to you, the investment process. So that's our Community Care Fund application. Any events upcoming will be listed just below here. So of course right now, ongoing, or at this very moment, is our application training. If you scroll down, there's a calendar. If there are events scheduled on your calendar, you'll see those there. And then at the very bottom here, you'll see the agency funding timeline for this particular process. And so this will look different if you are a granted agency. It will switch to your reporting timeline. So again, we'll revisit that in a moment. But what we're going to start with here is the community impact investment. So you can get to it either by clicking this link up here, or it will be here for you as well. So we will click here to get started. I'm going to quickly run through this, and hopefully this is a helpful overview. But again, if you have specific questions, you're always welcome to reach out to me directly, and I'm happy to walk through any specific questions that you might have. So this area here is what I was referring to when you have to assign a program specifically to this investment. Even if it's for operations, it has to have a program underneath the agency. And you can apply, multiple programs can apply under a single agency. We don't have a limit on how many agencies can apply, nor do we have a limit on how many programs can apply. So another example of that would be St. Vincent de Paul. They create one agency in our system, but then they can assign multiple programs. So for example, their shelter program, or their kitchen, Father Bill's Kitchen, or the eye care program, or Trinity Group Homes. Those are all programs underneath St. Vincent de Paul, and they'll have different program managers and profiles, but it's all going to be under the same agency. Okay, so what you'll do here, you see you've got up at the top sort of a progress bar. At any time, you can print your entire application, which I know for me is kind of helpful before I go in and start entering information to see an overview of what's there. Some folks like to jot notes. Maybe you're a longhand grant writer. That is also an option that prints out. The first thing that you'll do, if you haven't already, is complete your agency information. And so that's going to be kind of your basic contact information. You'll put in your mission statement here. Number of years of operation, 10. And let's see, your total agency budget, high roller there. And then for board composition here, you may choose to list your individual board members, or you can simply list the sector. For example, banking and finance, nonprofit, social services, healthcare, whatever. So just sort of showing the diversity of leadership within your board composition is helpful. So then your icons down here are to save your work and return to the previous page, or save your work and mark as completed. And so when you do that, when you save and mark as completed, then your progress bar down here shows that this is completed and ready to submit. And all those have to be completed, ready to submit before obviously you can actually submit. So moving down, your basic program information is, again, your contact information. This is specifically to that program. So you might have a few different ones, but again, you'll need to create a different program profile for each. And then we'll do $20 here. This is a section where we're really going to spend some more time on that when after we run through this piece and talk about grant writing tips and tricks. But after getting some really good feedback from our reviewers, they felt like something that was important to communicate with grant writers, and knowing the nonprofit field, sometimes you might have a paid professional grant writer, and you may have somebody who's never written a grant before in their life, and they're tasked with writing this grant. And so it's really hard to cover all the bases based on experience. So this is an attempt to help everyone be able to write better applications specifically for this grant. So some feedback from our reviewers here is, first of all, be sure to answer the questions. And it sounds kind of straightforward, but I am the guiltiest about really going off on tangents and putting in way more information than's needed and not ending up not actually answering the question. So just as a reminder, answer the question. You can answer these questions in narrative long form, or you can put in bullet points. Really, we just need the questions answered and need to show specifically here the goals of the program, and maybe it's just a single goal, but looking for goals and then those short-term benchmarks that will help indicate progress toward that ultimate goal. And so those can be numbered, whatever, but really, again, looking for goal number 1, increase literacy proficiency in 5-year-olds. And benchmark 1 is going to be mid-year literacy assessment of 50% or more. So specifically laying them out. Describing the evidence-based practices to achieve those goals. So you may have, in the example of, say, a literacy program, you may have a lot of research about early education curricula and teaching methods. You may have evidence that's more anecdotal. So for example, past clients who have gone through your program that have met with success. Again, looking for how do you know that what you're doing is changing conditions or improving lives? A lot of things feel really good, but how do you know? Describe the method for collecting data to measure the benchmarks and outcomes, answering specifically how you know you are successful. So this really runs the gamut, depending on your program type. So it could be, let's say, participation data. So how many citizens came in and used our food bank in a month? That's going to be a pretty quantitative measure, but you're recording how many people are coming in. What about repeat or duplicated families? You may have comparative data that would be like literacy competency before the intervention compared to literacy competency after the intervention, and what is your assessment for that, and how do you deploy that? You could have population level data. You could, for example, take a look at the housing success rate of individuals who are homeless. And so you might see the rates of homelessness decrease at the population level and be able to make reasonable assumptions based on your program intervention that this housing program is reducing the number of homeless individuals. So however you are collecting data, and there's really not a formula because every program is different in terms of what they're collecting, but essentially how do you know that what you're doing is making progress towards your goals? And that's at the overall level, so it could be something very long-term, as well as your short-term benchmarks. So down here, explain how the program is addressing the identified UWNI, United Way of North Idaho impact area. So when you created an account and you create an agency, it'll ask you for your program alignment, whether it's in health, financial stability, or education. So that's pretty self-explanatory, and you probably have a pretty good idea of how your program addresses that on the basis of your own program mission. Describing the population served by this program. This can be pretty general because there's a client characteristics section that we'll get to that's a quantitative section. So this one would be a great place to describe that. So for example, veterans experiencing homelessness, or under-resourced children in West Bonner County, or middle school students struggling in math. I mean, you can really use this space as a descriptive place because the client characteristics that's going to be in a different section is very, very quantitative. For example, age range, ethnicity, etc. So this is where you can really put in that rich detail. So this next section is implementation. And so this is how your program or agency is going to deploy the program with the funds. So we're looking for board, staff, and volunteers involved in implementing the program. It's helpful to describe, for example, the qualifications or experience with individuals who are involved in implementing the program and what they're bringing to the table. And that's very much the same for this second question, the collaborations and partnerships involved in implementing the program. So let's say you have a great partnership with Second Harvest as a food bank and also a grocery store. So you're getting some bulk foods from Second Harvest, you're also getting grocery rescue, and that's helping you really maintain your inventory of food for your food bank. Describe those partnerships and what they're bringing to the table. I would also add, we put in here leveraged financial and human resources. And really what we mean by those human resources are other volunteers that you might have. I mean, both of these are very similar, the board staff volunteers, and then the collaborations and partnerships. But let's say your program receives funding from a state organization, and it's very restricted to a specific activity, but as part of that you get technical assistance from the state organization. That would be a really great thing to put in there as well. This next question here, what can United Way do to support and grow the program outside of funding? So this is a great place to put in, we need help with marketing or promoting our volunteer opportunities, or can you link us up with a United Way in Treasure Valley? I mean, whatever it is that you think of, and it could be really creative. And this is a space too for us to help learn how we can be better partners in the community in investing in your programs and services. So if there are things that you can think of, and maybe it's just like, I don't know if this is a crazy thing and a wild hair, but I'm gonna say it anyway, those creative ideas really can spark innovation. So feel free to put in whatever you think. Okay, so I'm not going to, since I didn't complete that one, I'm gonna pause on that at any time just to show you another tool that you have here. Up at the top of your application on the right corner, you can quickly and easily switch forms, and it saves your information. Or you need to save your information before moving into another form, but it's just another thing you can do. So now we're into the kind of black and white. This is, so all of these sections that I'm about to go over, the client characteristics, the budget, and the measures, this is really going to make up the bulk of your reporting if you're selected for funding. The first one here is the unduplicated individuals served by the grant. And so what we mean by unduplicated individuals is unique, original individuals. So for example, the Help Center at St. Vincent de Paul serves a lot of individuals for a variety of services. So they track that when it's coming in, and you may have Joe come in, and so that's going to be one individual. Joe's going to come in and access 5 different services. It's not going to be 5 individuals served by the grant, it's one individual, 5 services. And so we really want to make sure that we're not double counting. These are things that are really helpful for us when we're reporting back to our funders, and particularly our funders who are in banking and finance, who are using their investments in United Way to accomplish their Community Reinvestment Act goals. Having those unduplicated numbers, as well as what I'll get to a little bit further in terms of their low to moderate income population served, helps us continue to maintain those investments, which then are reinvested into your programs and services. So for each of these, you'll put your target number. This is like a live form. It's a dynamic form, and so you'll need to make sure that whatever you put in totals and balances at the bottom. So if we're going to try and serve 30 people by mid-year, 60 by end of year, then your breakdown of characteristics here is going to need to total 60. So if you have that information and you've got a good sense of your target population, or getting a specific target population as part of your program, put it in that information. If you don't have a plan for that, or that's not an important part of your organization, let's say again, like a food bank that's serving families of all shapes, sizes, and ages, and you don't collect that data, that's fine. You can just put in 30 and 60 in the data not collected. Same thing with ethnicity. And we know that for a lot of individuals, especially those maybe working with school children, getting ethnicity and income information is protected information, and it may not be something that program managers or staff have access to. And again, that's completely fine. You can make a reasonable guess based on your your area population characteristics. So let's say a percentage using maybe the Alice report, you know that 40% of households in your community are Alice, you could probably make a reasonable assumption. But again, if you're not collecting that data, have integrity and just put your data is not collected. So the area median income, this again is another metric that is really important to the investments that, that we're entrusted with, as well as knowing that there are limited resources and we want to target those resources to the groups that are most likely to lack those resources. So we have a very strong focus at United Way on the Alice population. That can be found on our website as well, and it's a great data source as for kind of slicing and dicing what is going on in our community in terms of financial stability and financial instability. So I encourage you, and we'll, I believe Hannah a little bit later is going to talk about some data sources, but when determining if you are serving a population that is 100% of area median income, that's basically the Alice level, less than or equal to 80% AMI, that's basically the, that's considered low income, all the way down to like 50% is very low income, 30% of the area median income is the federal poverty level. But if you're having trouble with that, you can hover over this green arrow, and this is a live link to the HUD website, which will have the most recent localized data for those income demographics. You can also use the Alice report. That's very helpful as well. And if you have any questions, reach out. So in the counties served, that's pretty straightforward. We do have this fund open and accepts encourage applications from all 5 counties and organizations that may be based in Kootenai, for example, but serving other counties. We intentionally changed our name to United Way of North Idaho to really encourage that broader footprint. So again, just if you have that data or a plan for that, enter it in here. So we're going to return to the overview page here. And your program budget, again, even if you are writing for general operations, we're looking for your program costs. And so you can absolutely, and we encourage you to build in your personnel, your rent, your, I mean, whatever it is that you need to run your program efficiently and effectively, build those into your budget. Your work is worth funding fully. Again, Hannah's gonna chat about that a little bit and how your budget can really tell a story. These are the budget categories for your revenue. United Way grant funds would be previously granted funds. Some organizations get designations directly from payroll contributions. If you're not sure if you do, reach out and our finance specialist can let you know. If you have categories of revenue, so let me jump back for a second. So this first column is going to be revenue that you've secured, and then the second column here is revenue that is requested or pending. If you have line items that are not represented here, you can add other income. Just click on that. You need to add a description to it, so we'll call it, let's see, lemonade stand. And you secure $50 a month from that, and you're anticipating you're gonna get another 50. So then you save and return. And you can do that also for your expenses. So you've got your pretty typical categories here. You can always add an additional expense. You can name it whatever you want. I don't think there's a character limit on that, but easier to see if it's pretty short. Again, you want your budget to tell a story of your program. This is also a form that calculates, and so it will show down here what your totals are that you've entered, and help us quickly and easily as reviewers see how much is secured and how much is pending. So save and return. So the measures here, the measures are really a way to aggregate and proactively convey the collective impact of all of the work that is supported by United Way, but also the work that's being done in the community under the three impact areas of education, financial stability, and health. So each agency that applies for funding to United Way needs to select at least one quantitative measure and one results measure, so your rate of change. So we're going to navigate away from this page for a minute so that I can show you if you are confused about that. Well, let's see. Uh-oh. You know what? This one, I'm gonna have to switch screens for just a second. Sorry guys, I just have to get a different agency that hasn't submitted their program yet. Your kittens are ass. Okay. So in your measures, you will have the option, oh shoot, sorry guys, I am having a little technical difficulty here. I need to pull up another sample agency so I can show you what I mean by selecting your metrics. Bear with me. If anybody has any great jokes, feel free to tell them right now. Okay, I think this one should get us there. Nope, not that one either. Okay, this one should work. Well, all right, so that is not exactly what I meant to do. I'm gonna go back to, does anybody have a program in progress that they wouldn't mind using as a sample? Okay, we'll go back to this one. All right, so apologies for that. We're going to continue working. So this agency hasn't selected because it's a test agency, hasn't selected an impact area. And so that's why there's not outcomes listed here, but in your own programs, you'll select when you apply or when you create your agency profile, you'll select a program area, education, financial stability, of health, and that will pre-populate your options for your measurements. But, and so then it's the same type of thing where you'll put in your target, and that's your target for the numbers served, as well as your target for numbers achieving. So if you have questions about that, please reach out. These measures are not meant to be inclusive of all the work that you do, but rather a few limited aggregate indicators that we can use to show the impact of all of our work together. So on your left-hand column here, you'll see under the Resource Center, Agency Resources, you can click on that. And the indicator and outcome measurement guide is what you'll be using to kind of guide what those will be. So we're going to switch over to our downloads. So if you click on that, it will download. And I'll do a new share here. Okay. So this is the description of the local results framework. It describes your indicators and your outcomes here. And so depending on which impact area you're applying to, there's a select number of measurements that you'll choose. So education is broken into two. There's childhood success or school readiness and youth success. And so you'll have options that are these here. So these population indicators down here, you're not required to track. It is what we look at for kind of our 30,000 foot view of what the community is looking like. So you'll select an indicator. For example, if you're doing a literacy intervention program, you may put in the number of children receiving literacy support. So once you select that, then you'll have your target number that you put in. So let's say it's 60. Then you'll also need to select an outcome indicator. And so one that might be appropriate for that would be the percentage of children served to improve literacy skills. So when that pops up in your agency site, it will ask you for your target number served and then your target number that will have achieved. And so it could be 100%. You might say out of 60, 60 are going to improve their literacy skills. Again, that has to go back to the data that you're collecting and the evidence-based practices that you're using to inform your work. Most of the time we see like 70 to 80% of the population served will reach that milestone or the benchmark. So you'll have the option to put in a number there that will calculate your percentage. So let's say your goal is 70% out of 60. I don't know what that is. Let's say 50% because that's easier. You'll put in 30 children will improve their literacy skills out of this cohort of 60. It'll automatically calculate that for you as a 50%. Okay, so I'm gonna go back over to our sites here. Return to our home page. And so you can select as many measures out of there that make sense to you and that you can, with integrity, collect data and report on. But each agency is only required to select one of each. And then your reporting attachments are going to be pretty straightforward as well. You can upload a variety of file types. You'll need your letter of determination, your 990, and your anti-discrimination statement adopted by the board of directors. And that anti-discrimination statement ideally is both for your staff and programs as well as your clientele. So once you have those, you'll choose your file, you'll upload it, and then you'll save and return. Once that's all finished, you'll have, and these are orange, this will turn a different color. It'll turn a light yellow, ready to submit, and you'll be able to submit your program there. It will send a copy of it to, you can put in where you want a copy of it sent to, and it'll of course always be here to view on this, this form as well. So in terms of evaluation, I wanted to quickly just share with you, I'm going to open another window and show you what the evaluation looks like from a reviewer standpoint. Just a second. Oops. Okay. So our volunteers who review these, they are of our impact councils. They're assigned different applications to review. So for this one, for example, this is Mark Tucker. He has a task here to review the Space Cats program through Kittens R Us. So what they do, they have a scorecard here, and this scorecard is tallied as well. So on a scale of 0 to 5, they go through the application and answer these questions with a score. So you can see here, not demonstrated, poor, average, good, excellent. That tallies. Again, you'll see here, there is an emphasis on funding programs that include the ALICE population. So that's individuals above the federal poverty line, but below the ALICE income threshold. There's room for our reviewers. They have these quantitative scores here, but room for the reviewers to put in their comments. These, you'll notice, are answering the same questions that you were asked. Did the organization list key personnel? Did the organization indicate financial and human resources, engagement and relevant collaborations, et cetera, et cetera? And then the application attachments are basically a yes or no here, not demonstrated or satisfactory. And then there's a grand total score. So that is what it looks like from the evaluator's perspective. And when, if you're selected for funding, the reporting is going to look almost identical to your application, and the reviewer's evaluation of the reports is almost identical to this too. So I'm going to pause my part of the presentation and ask if there are any questions specific to the EC Impact platform. So anything about navigating the application, any challenges that people are having with logging on or accessing the documents or anything like that. Are there any questions specific to the platform? I'll check the chat box as well. Okay, so not hearing anything from there. I'm going to stop sharing this for a moment. And I would like to turn over the time to my good friend and colleague, Hannah. And I don't think I could do a very good job introducing her any better than she could. So Hannah, thank you so much for being willing to join us. And I asked Hannah to share with us because she has extensive experience in grant writing for a variety of organizations. And it's nice to not hear me the whole time also. So Hannah, go ahead and take it away.
All right, thank you, Carrie. I'm just gonna say now, I see a lot of wonderful people that I know on this call, and I know some of you are very talented grant writers. So this again is just some tips to help level the playing field, because we know that we, there's a variety of people applying for this. I've been in the grants profession for about 6 years. I'm currently the grants development manager at North Idaho College. I've been here for about 3 years. I get to work with the college and also the NIC Foundation and a variety of funders from, $1 million federal grants to our local Rotary Club. So I have a little bit of experience, and I think I have some useful insights that I can share to make everybody's grant the best that it can be. When I tell people what I do a lot of times, and I've heard this from other grant writers, like it's common, they say, why? And I think that's funny, and I think it comes from most people's experience with grants is writing them when you're also like a board member or a teacher or the program director, and it's like the last thing that you need to do on top of everything else. So with that said, I just came up with kind of 6 tips that I thought help me when I'm developing grants and can help everybody tell their story and highlight their program to the absolute, best ability. And I'll take about 10 minutes to share those with you. To reiterate some of what Carrie said, I just want to say that United Way is a great partner and a wonderful funder to write to. Carrie has always been very responsive. If you have questions, I always just email and she gets right back. They have a transparent process. It was really cool to see like the actual how we're going to be evaluated by the Impact Council. A lot of funders don't share that much information. And then there's a lot of great stuff on the website. It's really easy to find those impact areas and the measures and all of that. So we're working with a great partner who wants us to succeed, and these are just a few extra things to help you. So my first tip is assume that the reader doesn't know who you are or what you do. This isn't a huge community, so they probably do, but it's best to write as though you're introducing your organization and your program for the first time. Explain the basics, write out any acronyms the first time that you use them, and if it's possible, I find it really helpful to find somebody who's less familiar with the program, or maybe even less familiar with your organization, to read through your draft. And if they have any questions, you know, those things that your mind just leaps over because you do it every day, so you're like, obviously A plus B equals C. But if they have questions, then, you know, the reader on the Impact Council is likely to have those questions as well. So it's a great chance to answer those before you submit. My second tip, grant writing should be a balance between persuasive writing and technical writing, which is actually one of the things I like about grant writing. But you want to try and get that balance right. So sometimes I, you know, load up a proposal with a lot of great evidence and data and some $10 words and, you know, want to sound really professional. And then I read through and it is coming across as really clinical, and it's missing that heart and it's missing that why. And so in that case, it can be great to go back and add some stories, some testimonials that show why you're doing it and why it's working, on kind of that more visceral, emotional level. If it's a program that is longstanding or existing, excerpts from stories and testimonials can be great from clients that have gone through the program, or from your program director, perhaps. If it's a new program, maybe there's a story or an anecdote about why you know that this is a need, or why you think that this is going to work, that can be included to give a little bit more life and really illustrate that why are we doing this. But that said, you can also have the most beautifully written proposal that tugs on all the heartstrings, but if it's not underpinned by that data and evidence, it may not come across as strong of a project as it really is. So in terms of finding that data and evidence, I like to make sure that I have a few different sources as appropriate. You can definitely use your own internal data, your surveys, your numbers. If you do, I like to also include maybe a more objective or official source of data. If what you're dealing with is a national problem, like maybe your work supports locally efforts on opioid abuse prevention and treatment, you can start with some of that national level data. This is what this problem looks like across the country, and then, you know, maybe bring it into a more regional, and then maybe local, or even your internal data can kind of say, you know, we know this is all happening, it's happening here, and that's why we know this is a problem. US Census data is great to use. You can get it really, really localized. That's a great tool. The Department of Labor and their Bureau of Labor Statistics is something I use a lot. Our Idaho Department of Labor has great statistics. Carrie didn't tell me to say this, but I use United Way's Alice report like every single day for everything. That has wonderful information in it, and that's very obviously tailored to our local community. And then in terms of evidence, if there is maybe a pilot program that you considered when you were designing your project, or a study, make sure to mention that. And you're the expert in your field, so you know those articles and those evidence, and just make sure that you connect those dots and show that it's all supported. So Carrie kind of teed me up for this one. Number 3, the budget tells the real story. I know some grant reviewers who just start with people's budget and then go back to the other sections because they feel like that's where the real meat of the project is. And I don't disagree with that. But I think sometimes when you're writing it, you start with your narrative, you're thinking about evaluation, and the budget can almost seem tacked on by the time that you get there, but it's not an add-on. I would recommend even starting with the budget, getting that really fleshed out, and then going from there. If your narrative sounds amazing, but there are discrepancies with your budget, that's going to really undercut the strength of your proposal. Make sure that you tie each budget line back to something, an action or an outcome in the narrative. And then don't talk a lot about things in the narrative that are not going to be represented in the budget. As Carrie said, you know, some of the things that you're bringing to the table that you're leveraging, your staff time, your volunteer time, your space, your supplies, the things that you're not asking United Way for funding for, maybe they were funded by somebody else, or it's just the cost of doing business for your organization. You can talk about those, and you should certainly include those in the spaces provided. And there's a tendency for nonprofits to always want to make our overhead look smaller so that we can say we only spend X amount or X percent. And United Way is one of the partners that really wants to see the full project, as Carrie said. So you can ditch that toxic mindset and just lay out what it truly costs to do the work. All right. So Carrie said this as well, but I'm going to reiterate it because I think it's probably actually my most important tip. Number 4, answer the question. When you start writing, separate out each little part and subpart of each question, answer it, and then, you know, you can kind of stitch your narrative together from there. Familiarize yourself with the United Way impact areas and the indicators and the measures. They're all on the website. Make sure you're really specific about the evaluation. There's a lot of questions about that. It's awesome if you have other grants or websites or cases for support that you can pull language from. That's a great place to start. But I think that I'm sometimes guilty of being like, oh yeah, we've written about this program, so we're going to pull this great language. It's all really well developed. And it like just doesn't quite answer the questions. So do go back if you're using other materials and make sure that it's tailored to these exact questions. If you did find that buddy from outside your program or outside your organization who agreed to proofread your grant for you for chocolate or probably not a beer at this point, I don't know what we bribe people with in quarantine. But if you have that person proofreading your grant, it's great to give them the questions and say, you know, did I answer these? Can you cross-check these for me? Because again, if they have a question like that doesn't quite fit, then that's probably something that the reviewer will feel as well. With that, my tip number 5 is be clear and concise. When you, so I wrote down character limits exist for a reason. It's not just to make our jobs stressful. You know, that's the amount of information that they want. So if you find that you've gone way over, if I've written 5,000 characters and it's supposed to be 2,000, I am doing way too much. And this is a thing that happens to me like on a very regular basis. And you have to go back and just kind of refocus and decide what the reader, what United Way really needs to know about your program. What's the problem you're solving or the opportunity you have? How are you going to do it? Who are you helping? Why do you think it's going to work? How do you know that it works? Hone in on those key points and maybe pull back some of the tangents, as Carrie said. Not everything has to be beautifully crafted, long form narrative. Bullet points are awesome. Lists are awesome. Whatever helps you to get your point across in a clear, easy to understand, easy to read way, which is a tall order for a lot of these programs that are solving complex problems in our community. But you know, do your best to really boil that down. There's a great, and I will, after I'm done talking, I'll find the link and drop it in the chat, but there's a fun tool, I think it's fun, that I use when I get stuck. And it's called Hemingway Editor, and it's just it's a website online, and you copy and paste all your stuff into it, your whole section or your whole narrative, and it like lights up red and yellow with all the parts that are hard to read and helps you, you know, streamline extra clauses and adverbs and weird phrasing, and shows you the reading level, you know, on the side. So you probably want to strive for like grade 9, not like graduate level. So I'll drop that. It's fun to use, and it does help me kind of bust out of a jam when I'm like, I can't take anything out and it's still so far over character limit. So last tip, just be mindful of your finishing touches and your overall presentation. Dot your I's and cross your T's, so to speak, though with an online application that's a little abstract. Do a thorough proofread. If you can get a buddy to proof it for you, very helpful. I think it's a great way for nonprofits to collaborate also. Can we swap applications? Will you read mine? I'll read yours. We don't need to be tooth and nail competitive. I think we're all in it together to make a better North Idaho. An occasional error will slip through, but if your proposal is just absolutely riddled with mistakes, then, I think that the reviewer is going to maybe wonder if you're going to approach your program in kind of a careless and slapdash manner, which is not true, but you want to make sure that you're presenting, the care that you take with your organization, that comes through in your application. Make sure that your attachments are easy to read, that, your information is up to date and thorough. If you are using like material from other things, make sure those numbers are updated, all that kinds of things. So just the attention to detail that you put into your final presentation kind of reflects on your whole organization. So just be mindful of that. And those are my tips. And I will hand it back over to Carrie, and I'll find that link and I'll put it in the chat. I think it's really fun to play with.
I had no idea that existed, and I have needed that my entire life. So super excited about that Hemingway tool. It's sort of a running joke in my office. Why say it in 5 words when Carrie can say it in 27? So I appreciate that, Hannah, and I appreciate also the time that you took to kind of put together some great tips they're helpful to me as well. And I'm wondering, I see my friend and colleague Arwen Robinson from Advanced Benefits on here as well. She was a tentative earlier. And so I'm wondering, Arwen, if you might be willing to share some of your feedback as a Impact Council member as well. Arwen's been on our Health Impact Council for the past 4 years, I believe.
Something like that.
And I really appreciate hearing your feedback as well, because you really think through things logically and offer some good critical feedback. So I wonder if I might call on you to talk about what the experience is like from a reviewer perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you hear me okay, Carrie, just first of all? Okay, perfect. So yeah, I mean, when you're talking about like appealing to a lower reading level or appealing to somebody that doesn't understand what those acronyms are, me 4 years ago, I was brand new to the council. I had very little to no experience as to what nonprofits were operating and applying for grants. And so when you say like, hey, write the grant, write your application like somebody doesn't know who you are, that is 100% true and accurate. And even if someone does know who you are, it was just very eye-opening for me to be like, oh, I've heard about them, but I have no idea what it is that they do. So that was a really, really insightful. I've seen applications that are just wall-to-wall words. And so I would say that, just reading, when we print out all these applications and you feel like you're reading a business novel, it just makes your brain very, very tired. And so definitely one thing I always appreciated when reviewing the applications was when the applications were broken up as far as their format was concerned. Some applications had like, hey, here's a little bit of narrative, here's some bullet point information, here's a little bit more narrative, here's a testimonial, here's some more bullet points. And so being able to break it up and make it interesting to read, and for those applications that really hooked me and were interesting, those are the ones that I wanted to learn more about, and that I wanted to, that the message of what they did really sunk in for me. And then I would say too that, just like everyone said, is just, making sure that you're answering the question, just not to beat that dead horse, but right, we're looking at this rubric of like, hey, did they address this? And you're kind of like, well, I mean, they kind of did. This narrative touched on it, but I don't really know if it answered the question. And then this bullet point so if it's a little unclear, and if we're having to slow down and be like, okay, they kind of sort of answered the question, versus being able to see like, oh, here's a couple sentences where the first sentence was in regards to X, Y, and Z. I can be like, okay, cool. There's the question and there's the answer. So it made it very easy to review and quick to process. We all know that everyone's causes and agencies are amazing. But when we're, looking at a stack of, dozens of applications, it can be a lot to take in. So just, you want to make sure your application stands out. And so I would say just make it interesting, to the point, as succinct as it can be, and as clear as possible.
Thank you, Erwin. I appreciate that. So now is the moment we've all been waiting for, which is open question and answer time. And I would say, if you have questions for myself, I didn't approve this with Hannah or Arwen before, but I feel like if you have questions for Hannah or Arwen, I believe they'd be so kind as to answer them as well. So please, what's on your mind? What are you having trouble with? What would you like follow up with? The time now is yours, and we've got about 30 minutes left in our time here. So Cindy, are you about to say something?
Yeah, I've got a takeaway and a question. One of the things that you talked about, Carrie, was that some of the questions that you're asking are specifically answering the funders, the agencies, their own priorities that they need to be filling. And I don't know how the funders get the information, but that adds some really great depth to the application as I'm filling it out. Some of those questions have been kind of frustrating for me, and I can look at that and go, oh wow, this is really helping my community, because I understand that when they can hit their benchmarks, then that helps funding our community as well. And so that was an awesome insight. Thank you. Okay, my question is about the budget. That part where you get to add additional items. So Lazy Cindy, whoops, I don't know what I just did, but yeah. Lazy Cindy would like to add the bottom part that would just say all other program items, and then just dump in the number that would make my my budget equal what our organization budget is. But I understand, and I don't do that, but I am so tempted because our line items are not apples to apples to what the United Way questions are for budgets, and with other funders as well. And so, it turns into lumping things together, whether it's insurance or professional fees, or we've got a pretty detailed line item to budget, and so so the budget that I saw that it's asking for, there's just a lot of clumping things together that aren't naturally clumped together. So I hear that the budget tells a story. So if I'm adding other, like, part of me is also thinking, if you didn't ask for it in the application, you don't really care what the other things are. But then I'm hearing, no, that's not true. This is going to share more depth about the organization. But what do you want there? Like, how many line items is too many? Because I can do 27 line items if you want to, but I don't think that you want to see all the little details there. Or maybe it's like additional guest services and additional administrative fees. I don't know what I don't want to be lazy, but I also don't want to inundate. And yeah. So.
Well, and I also think that we don't want to, it's a tricky thing, right? Because the more administration that you have to do grant writing is less time you are in program development and things like that. So I hear your concerns. Hear you, Cindy. And I would say, and I have a response to this, and then I'll bounce it to Hannah, Arwen, April, if they have insight as well. But I think grouping like smaller items together makes sense. And I mean, you can be liberal with the other kind of those other categories that you put in there. And I would say, you know, if there, I guess, do you have specific things that you are struggling to communicate in the budget?
Maybe some of the things that are lined out in our office supply, you know, do you want to know our copier lease, and then how much we're spending on paper and how much we're spending on phones? I mean, all of those are different line items for us.
Yeah.
Security.
I mean, for us, when we're writing grants, we typically build in like program specific percentages, right? So like in our preschool development grant, 90% of the personnel time is going to be, well, okay, we put in like 90% of my salary as a personnel fee for that grant. So that's the majority of what I do. For Carrie, who's the finance, it's more like 30% that's reflective of her work on that specific grant project. And then we also, in addition to that, have a board determined percentage of administration, which is 10%, that covers essentially the security, the copier lease, the, you know, the things like that. And Carrie, if I'm getting that incorrect, Carrie Wilfong, please feel free to chime in, because, you know, I'm not the numbers gal here. I see her unmuted, but Carrie, I can't hear you if you're saying anything. Okay. So Hannah or Arwen or April, do you have advice for Cindy on the budget question?
I would say just what makes sense, right? Like when, you know, and again, I'm coming at this from like the layman. This isn't at all what I do every day. So this could be terrible advice, but here we go. But I think it's just what makes sense, right? We just want to know that, you know, we have a responsibility to the donors and to the funders, and to be able to show like that good faith of like, hey, we're operating as efficiently as possible to ensure that the organization is in fact you know, being a good steward of the dollars. And so, you know, I don't care if you spend, you know, how much you spend on paper. What I care about is, are you an efficiently run organization that's maximizing the grant? And so if that's all, you know, lumped together into a single like office budget, and then for me, like that feels like kind of my responsibility, where I'm like, you know, if I have questions about like, hey, is this office category budget too big or too small? I'm more than able to even talk to my own organization and be like, hey, you know, is this big or small? Can I have something to compare against? Or I can reach out to the agency and ask for, you know, like, hey, can I see last year's or the year before's to see if this is a big increase? You know, so, you know, I think that it's all about efficiency, really.
April, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, Carrie, that there are some things that you may want to combine into one line item and not separate them all out, because you don't want it to get to where there's so much that it's hard to make sense of. So, for example, if you have some of those things, do combine some of that and put it as office supplies and total it up. And then if there are things that you want to make sure that are pointed out directly, that pertain directly to the project that you're applying for the grant, then use that other field and lay it out there so we can specifically see the different types. So we don't care about every office supply. We really don't. We care about the overall picture of your organization and your project.
Makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Carrie, you're on mute.
Thank you. So a question in the chat from Sandpoint Youth Center. So the collaborations and partnerships section on the grant application, you talked about, quote, leveraging financial and human resources, but her internet stopped for a moment and couldn't hear. So I'm going to re-explain that financial and human resources piece. So what we are looking for, so financial resources are going to be those actual dollars. And then the human resources are going to be anything that's non-monetary, basically. So it could be in-kind resources, it could be volunteers, it could be technical assistance that you're getting from another organization, it could be really just, I mean, those two questions on that application, Kate, are first specific to your internal organization, so your board, staff, volunteers that are really internal in the organization. The second question about sort of outside partnerships and collaborations, that's sort of that more expansive, who else is coming to the table, what else are they bringing that's helping you build capacity and be more effective and efficient in your work. And I think pointing out some, I think Hannah had a couple creative things that she pointed out in terms of, you know, what those might look like. They could be your, let's see, I'm trying to think of something. Oh, okay, so actually, Cindy, your Family Promise and your office is in a church building, which probably helps keep your overall office overhead a little bit lower. And so that may be an actual resource that you're listing in your budget, but it's also a great partnership. And there's probably more than just sharing that space in the building that is a benefit to the program. There's probably visibility for volunteers and things like that. So really just thinking about what those bigger partnerships are. And I think the Sandpoint Teen Center, for example, the last I visited was housed in a bowling alley, and it was really cool because the so it's an after school space for teens, but the owner basically set up an incentive program that said, like, if you come in and you accomplish this goal or do your homework or whatever, you can bowl for free. And so that's another example of that partnership. I could be getting that completely wrong, Kate. There was something about free bowling in the teen center, and that's where they have, where they had their location for a while. But I hope that helped answer your question. Okay, other questions?
Come on, it's an application. There's more questions out there.
Again, some of these questions come up as you're working through them, and I am certainly, my job is to be here to help you. I don't make any of the granting decisions, so I get free reign to help guide applicants. And so myself, I think maybe if just even Googling like resources can be helpful. But if you have questions about a budget, you have questions about how to frame your narrative, what have you, I have the benefit of not participating in those funding decisions. And so that allows me to be able to help and be available to you.
So I have a question, silly question, but sometimes when we're starting a new program, I always wonder, what's it appropriate to even ask for? I know that's a silly question, but you can have a budget for a new program. The program is, let's say the program is a small program and it's $25,000. And so at that point, do you ask for what the program needs are, or do you think about the organization that you're asking to grant from and lower the number? Do you know what I mean? It's like sometimes it's difficult to know what's appropriate.
That's a good question.
Hannah, what do you think?
That's a super good question, and it's not a silly question, and I spend a lot of time thinking about this, and you know, you don't want to come off as asking for too much, but you also want to be clear about the whole, you know, program cost. And then if you have a $25,000 program and you're only asking for $5,000, like, they're probably going to wonder where's the other 20 grand going to come from. So Carrie, is there a minimum or a maximum for this grant? I know you guys retooled it a little bit. I haven't.
Yeah, so typically grant amounts range from 5 to 10,000. We have granted smaller amounts before, but the depth of information that we look for on the application, as well as the reporting requirements, is a lot for a small grant. So that's typically the bracket. Do you have something in mind, Barb, like maybe some more specific details that might help me understand your struggle? You're muted.
Last year there was a big grant for Hannah knows this. There was a big grant for a women's business center, and as we went through that process, we realized that we did not want to start a women's business center. What we wanted to start was a co-op for women who were living under the Alice numbers to be able to come together, develop skills, and also produce goods that we would sell in stores and stuff like that, to fund a small fund for them to be able to pay for childcare and the cost of materials for what they want to build. And it didn't meet the matrix of what a women's business center matrix were. And we did not want to meet those matrix. We were not interested in how many businesses we could start. What we are interested in is giving women the confidence to even go to their boss right now and say, I want to do more, or I'm worth more, or whatever. And also to develop skills around maybe building something for an Etsy store or something. And we really think that's a good project, and we put it on the back burner, but we're still contemplating it. And we don't want to do it in the $100,000 level and then find a $100,000 match, which wasn't that right, Hannah? It was something like that. I can't remember anymore. But anyway, we don't want to do that. We want to do something that's more personal. So that's the question. That's why I asked that question.
So would there be a way to maybe piece out sections of that? Like, I mean, the childcare piece would be extraordinarily relevant to the work that we're doing. And just in that, if that's something that you're writing for example, there could be a great opportunity to leverage additional funds, because childcare is such a key focus for us. And talking about Alice on childcare is, can't say it enough, huge focus. So I think that if, definitely there are projects that are bigger than what our scope of funding is. Maybe this isn't exactly what you're asking, but if there are pieces that United Way can help fund and start kind of launching that program to then, it's a cart and a horse kind of thing, right? And like Emerge, the Emerge program, not the one at Kootenai Health, but the Artist Collective, had the same issue where the first couple of years that we were writing grants, they were asking for successfully received grants. And, but in order to keep running, you've got to write the grant. So it's, how do you make the case for yourself that you're going to be a successful organization if you don't have that yet? And so I'm sort of thinking that if there's an opportunity to piece out sections of that, that could help leverage other funds, that would be my advice.
Yep.
Carrie Wilfong wrote in the chat, it's a balance. I'd say showing scalability could be one answer. Our vision is a 25,000 program, but we can launch with 5,000, for example.
Right. Okay. That was my question.
Okay.
I'll mute now.
What else?
Carrie, if we're not funded, is there any chance that you would share those reviewer comments and scores for people to be able to see like what you might be able to improve next time?
Definitely. Yep. And if anybody, I know I kind of skipped through that evaluation scorecard kind of quickly, but if anybody wants a copy of that, I'm happy to send you a PDF of it. I think it's pretty important. I know that you're right, Hannah, like it's really not something that's often an opportunity, but I think it's important to share just how an organization is scored and showing that transparency, and that the language of the evaluation is the same language in the application. So we're really trying to get as close as we can to comparing apples and apples, pineapples and pineapples. I'm kind of hungry for lunch. Right, last chance, except for if you email me directly. Okay, well, this has been fun. I appreciate you all that have taken the time to check into this session and to get this additional information. Again, I'll send out the link to the YouTube channel that it'll be on, and if just ignore the part where I like scrambled around trying to find the right program field on the website. It really is pretty easy to use. But I also want to say thank you very much to Hannah for sharing your insight about grant writing. Thank you to Arwen for sharing your perspective as a reviewer. And that I know that it takes a lot of time to go through those applications and give them your full presence and be fair about that. I also want to say thank you very much to April, who is a beacon of light. And I mean that very, very much so, and is always looking for ways to help expand this work, to grow the community that is around this work, and engage people. And I cannot tell you how important it is to have your lived experience on this council from the moment I came into this job and ongoing. So I just really appreciate that guidance and support. So thanks everybody for all that you do. Once again, in case I didn't drive it home enough, please, any questions, comments, suggestions, you need any resources whatsoever, please reach out. That's what I'm here for. And if I don't know the answer, I'll find somebody who will. And maybe it'll be Google, maybe it'll be a real person. Who knows? But I hope everybody has a great day. Thank you so much, and we'll hopefully connect with you soon.
Thank you, Carrie.
Bye.